Welcome to the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. My name is Lauren Wells, here with my co-host, Chris Seveney. We're committed to providing you with the knowledge required to build wealth through real estate investing. Tired of consuming content about real estate? Stuck in analysis paralysis? Ready to do your first deal? As a member of our community, you will learn how to go from consuming content to taking that first step into the world of real estate investing. Our show is not about getting rich quick, but about providing you with the knowledge you need to take action. Join us as we speak with experienced investors who share action tips on how to escape the corporate world, start a thriving side hustle in the world of real estate, and go beyond your W-2 or 401k.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. Today, I have Dustin Heiner, who is a real estate investor and now focuses a lot on the passive investing side and hosting conferences, including his Real Estate Wealth Builders Conference, which is coming up in the near future. Dustin, how are you today?
I'm blessed, Chris. How about yourself, man? Well, I just love that you have this passive investing podcast simplified, but this is terrific. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
And you also have a podcast as well, the Master Passive Income podcast that, of course, we'll leave in the show notes as well. And for those who are watching this on YouTube, I got to say, I love the shirt. So,
well, a quick side note about that. When I quit my job when I was 37 years old, I was telling everybody that I was retired. And they were like, what do you do with your life? You know, like you play golf all day. I'm like, well, no, I actually do a lot more. I love businesses. I create businesses. And so my wife helped me come up with the term successfully unemployed, just a different way to say that I'm not working for somebody else.
Yep. So yes. So his shirt says successfully unemployed. So let's rewind and let's talk about how you got from point A to being successfully unemployed.
Well, yeah. So I was blessed to be able to quit my job when I'm 37 years old, but I didn't start as a real estate investor. In fact, I started just like most of us start, where we go to school and we're told you get good grades and then you go to college and you get thousands and thousands of dollars in debt, good grades, and get a quote unquote career with a degree, a company, and work 40 plus years of your life and eventually retire at 65, 70 years old and live on 40% of what you've managed to save that entire time working at JOB. I like to call it the just over broke job because that's what you're living is just over broke. So I'm doing that exact same thing. In fact, I got the most stable, secure job you could ever think of. So I was living in California at the time, working at a local county government doing technology. So technology is not going away. The government's definitely not going away. California is going to be sticking around for a long time. So I get a job and I'm working a regular 9 to 5, but I've always been entrepreneurial, the idea of starting businesses. I had a graphic and website design company. I had pizzeria that I started from scratch. I had a skateboard manufacturing business and all these businesses to try to make it so I didn't have to work for somebody else. But they didn't do very well. But the one that I started that was amazing was I bought one rental property. I bought one piece of real estate back in 2006 and before the crash. And eventually I had enough properties to be able to quit my job. But this is a story of what really shoved me to getting out of the rat race and get into real estate. So my wife and I started having children and I knew I needed to become an investor, full-time investor, but life started getting in the way. And so we had 4 children. Now we have 5 now. But on our 4th child, when my 4th child was born, I went on paternity leave. That's where the dad stays home with the mom, changes poopy diapers and all the good stuff, bonds with the baby. Well, I get back to work after 2 weeks. And then in that same week that I get back to work on a Friday at 3:30 in the afternoon, I get a call from my boss's secretary, the top dog. And she says, Dustin, would you please come to the office? And I said, sure. And I hung up the phone. I paused for a second. I thought, why in the world did they call me to the office? Like, this isn't normal. And I've seen plenty of movies. This is not a good sign. And so I paused for a second. I thought, my goodness, if I get laid off right now, what's going to happen? So anyways, I shake it off because I say, I have so much seniority. I work for the government. Nobody gets fired or laid off the government. So I get up and I start walking down the hallway to my boss's office. Now, Chris's hallway isn't very long. In fact, it's kind of short. But every single step I took, I felt like the hallway got longer and longer and longer. And I felt like my feet became lead bricks because the weight of potentially losing my job was raining down on me. Well, I get down the hallway and I turn the corner and I see my boss's door. His door is closed and I see his secretary there. Super sweet, nice old lady. And she says, Dustin, would you please have a seat? And sheepishly grinning at me, trying to console me with her eyes, because she knows everything about what's going on. I know nothing about what's going on. So I go and I take my seat and I start thinking about my life. This whole plan that I've been told to go through. Well, if I lose my job right now, I started thinking, did I just waste my life doing this? And we just had our 4th child. If I can't make money to feed my family, does that make me a failure as a father? Does that make me a failure as a husband, as a man trying to provide for his family? Well, as I'm sitting there, my hands get all clammy, my forehead gets all sweaty because the nerves of potentially losing my job is crushing me. Well, the door to my boss's office opens up, and out walks a coworker of mine with a piece of paper in her hands. She is noticeably distraught, noticeably upset. She's not necessarily crying, but you can tell her world has just been devastated. Well, she passes by. My boss says, Dustin, would you please come in the office? So I get up and I go into the office and I get laid off. And remember, this is the government. Nobody gets fired or laid off from the government, but I did. And this is the reason why I tell everybody this story. So I take my layoff notice and I sit back down in my chair and I realize 2 things. Number one, I need to get another job. I need to be able to provide for my family. So I was really blessed, praise the Lord, to find another job in the same county. Another department wasn't having the same issues. So check, got that. But sitting in that chair, the second thing I realized, and this is the reason why I tell the story, was I need to make sure that this never, ever happens to me again. I need to make sure that nobody has the ability to take away my ability to feed my family. So right then and there, I started telling every single person that I ever met that instead of, when you asked a question, what do you do? I would normally reply, I work for the county doing IT. Instead, I replied, I am an investor. It may so happen that 100% of my money comes from my job. That's not my part-time job. I'm a full-time investor. Now, fast forward the story, started buying property after property after property, each one making me a minimum of $500 a month in passive income. Eventually, I have 30 plus properties. I realized, my goodness, I don't need to work anymore. So quick last part of the story. I went to my new boss after I had 30 plus properties and said, hey, boss, I'm laying you off. We jokingly, and we laughed. And he said, well, Dustin, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't have to do anything. I own real estate that makes me money without even working. So last part of the story, I would walk to and from my job every single day, 1.5 miles every day, because I'm too frugal to pay for parkings in downtown. Well, this last walk, I felt like I was walking on clouds because I knew I would never, ever need a job again, as opposed to that short walk that I got laid off. This was such a different change. And everybody listening, you need to realize this point. You will never be paid what you are worth. Your boss will never pay you what you're worth, because you'll know this by your boss is paying you just enough to keep you working without quitting, but not so much money that takes money out of your pocket or their pocket. And as soon as you realize that, you'll realize that there are better ways to make money. And that's why I love passive income, where we invest our money and we buy investments that make us money without working an hour and getting paid for that hour. And so that's the big thing that really grabbed me to shove me into becoming a passive investor. So I'll pause the story because you probably got plenty of questions.
Yeah. So a few things that pop up. You mentioned that we like to talk about a lot is I have the same story, similar story of go to college, get the job and so forth. And I remember the first job offer I got, I turned it down and my parents like, why would you do that? And I ended up making right out of college an extra 10 grand going somewhere else. But one of the phrases that somebody coined at one point in time, and I forget who it was, but I love to use is, and you hit the nail on the head, we call it the 40-40-40 club. You work 40 hours a week for 40 years to collect 40% of your income. And that's the reality of it. And people think that, I'm just going to retire off of my 401k. Now, one of the things that my story is similar but different in the fact that I had a life event that caused me to reflect and realize I got to care for my family, my job, or I can't have that income. How am I going to do that? And that's what kickstarted a lot of my investing and becoming an investor. And it took me a while before I quote unquote full-time investor because I still had that W-2. But when you're thrown into it, sometimes it's probably better because you never ever hear anybody say, I waited too long to quit my W-2.
Absolutely. I wish I would have quit sooner. And there was one thing that you mentioned, the 401k, that I really got to say. If people are relying on their 401k for retirement, you need to realize what the 401k was created or why it was created. So back, I think in the 1970s or before then, there were pensions. Companies had pensions. And then the rich people who ran those companies realized, well, let's make the tax laws because, the rich people are the ones that have to do the government. So they created the 401k. Well, what the 401k is, instead of putting the pension creating the pension on the company. The company have to manage it, have to take care of it, pay it out indefinitely and all that. They said, let's put it on the employee. Let's make sure it's their fault if they lose money. Let's make sure they're the ones that have to raise money. Oh yeah, we'll give them a little bit of money to match whatever they're, but the 401k goes back into their own companies and stocks and mutual funds. So they're like, it's a win-win for everybody. So I love like what you're doing with note investing. I mean, you could even, I believe, you might know this better, but you can use a self-directed IRA. Don't give it to the big companies. Invest it in notes, invest it in real estate. Instead of making other people rich, you need to make yourself rich.
Yeah. And we do allow self-directed IRA custodians to invest. We actually also allow for even people who have specific accounts if they're using, like with Charles Schwab. For example, I think it's called a brokered account, that if you're using an actual broker, instead of, again, with Schwab, instead of investing in their product or investing in Microsoft, you could invest in my company as well. So a lot of people don't realize that or know that. And they're just like, oh, and there's risks investing with smaller private companies. It's
risks in investing in every company. Yes, exactly.
I was going to say, first company I invested in, like I graduated college and I took like $5,000, and I graduated college in the late 90s. And I'm like, I'm going to invest in this awesome tech company called WorldCom because they're going to take over the planet.
I do remember that.
If you're young enough or you don't know who WorldCom is, it's because they don't exist anymore. They were Enron before Enron, or basically what they were. So that's an awesome story because I think a lot of people can relate to that. Now, you've also continued on the path of building your own successful, investing your own, but you also give back and provide a lot of content, feedback. You have the podcast, conferences. Tell us a little bit more now about all the stuff you do that you give back.
Oh man, I absolutely love that question. So where it started was because I quit my job when I was 37 years old. I had everybody asking me, how did you quit your job? And the second question always came, well, can you show me? Because I told them I bought one rental property and made me money. Then I bought another one and made me more money, and over again. And so I started teaching my friends and coworkers and family members one-on-one. And I realized two things. I enjoyed it and I had a lot of free time because I wasn't working. And so I thought there's got to be a better way to reach more people, to help more people. And so after I had 30 plus properties, each one making me a minimum of $500 a month, we have hotels and apartment complexes, like all these different assets that I had extra time. And I thought, you know what? I don't need to continually buy more real estate. I'm not driven by money. No, not saying that's wrong if you are. It's just not how I am. I started helping people and I started feeling more fulfilled in my life when I saw my students buy their first property. When my students quit their job or got what their goal was, financial independent, instead of an accomplishment. When I bought a house, it was an accomplishment. But when my students bought the house, I felt like I was fulfilled because they accomplished something. I helped another human being get what they really wanted. So fast forward the story. Once I started realizing this is something I want to do, I wrote a few books. And then I started a podcast. We're at 2 million downloads now, YouTube channel, courses, coaching to help more people to invest in real estate. And then now we have 2 conferences. We even have local real estate investor meetups. And here's the reason why I do all this. I know you definitely appreciate this. So the more and more people that I serve in this life get what they want, the more money I make and the more money they make and the better our lives get. And I realized that when I was 26, I said, you know what? I want to quit my job in 10 years. Blessed at 37 years old, be able to quit the job. Then I made a new goal. My new goal is to help 1 million people to invest in real estate, become financially independent. And here's the great thing about it. I make money because if they want to come to my conference, we make some money, but at the same time, they get what they want. Now, if I'm coaching somebody, we make a little money because our time is worth money. Then they get what they want because they get assets. They make money. They get financially free. I kid you not, all of my students thank me for all the time that I give them. And basically what they're saying is, thank you for letting me pay you to do this, to teach us, because I know you don't have to do this. So wrap everything up, fast forward everything. It's because of my goal to help 1 million people to invest in real estate. So now we have 2 conferences, and I'll be completely honest, I work more now than I ever did working for the government. I have 5 businesses that make me money. Real estate's just one of them. But at the same time, it's what fulfills me, and it's what gets me out of bed every morning.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. We hope you're enjoying this episode of Creating Wealth Simplified. We wanted to take a moment and tell you more about our passive income fund at Seveney, which is open to both accredited and non-accredited investors. Our latest offering targets an 8% annual return distributed monthly with the ability to potentially achieve a greater return through our bonus share program. If you'd like more information, reach out to us at invest@seveneyinvestments.com to learn more. Thank you. How long have you now been kind of coaching and teaching and putting on the conferences? How long has that been going on?
Yeah, it's been a growth. So we started with the books, then the podcast, YouTube channel, then the coaching and the courses. The conference has been maybe 3 or 4 years now, but I started back in 2015, started coaching people, started the podcast and everything like that. But it really came out of, because when I first started investing in real estate, I followed those gurus. Now, you might have seen these, Chris, we're about the same age. So when in 2006, I was watching a late night infomercial. You know, that's what you do when you work a job. You just work and then go watch TV, work and go watch TV. Well, late night infomercial came on. These real estate gurus came on and said, "We're coming to your town, a free 2-hour seminar." I'm like, great. I went to that. And I'm so excited, but it was all hype and sales pitch. And they said, "Now run to the back. It's normally $1 million, but it's $1,000 a day for this 2-day seminar." I ran to the back because I didn't know what I was doing, spent a lot of money. And then I went to the 2-day seminar, which is another sales pitch for an $80,000 course, a $100,000 course. I don't have that money, but I did take what little they told me. And I bought a property, and my property manager started stealing from me within 6 months. And I knew if I just hung my head and said, "You know what, this doesn't work," then I would not be where I am today. But I said, there's got to be a way to do this right, because people have been doing this forever. I just didn't do it the right way. So if you remember, at the beginning, I said I've been very entrepreneurial in my life. So instead of taking what those gurus say, and they say, you know, you buy an investment and that's what you do. But I realize now what we do is we build a business, and that business runs itself because we hire experts. So quickly getting to, instead of finding a property, this is what the gurus tell you, find a property anywhere in the country and then spend thousands of dollars to buy it, thousands of dollars to fix it up. Then you find a tenant, and then you try to find a property manager to manage it. Well, in my opinion, that's just about backwards. What you need to do is you need to build the business first so that it runs itself. And what I decided to do was, instead of going the route of what they told me, I built the business, and then I considered every single piece of property a piece of inventory that goes into my business. Basically, like if you're going to start a convenience store, you're not going to sign a lease on a location, open the doors, and set a box of candy bars in on the ground. You wouldn't do that. You go out of business in 2 seconds. But what you would do is you would build the business first, get the gondolas. That's where the candy bars go on, the countertops, cold storage, bank accounts, cash registers, insurance, employees, everything in the business before you buy any inventory. Same thing with real estate investing. I had to realize we need to do this. And now this is what I teach all of my students now, is because I've done it. I invest in Ohio, Texas, Arizona, Tennessee, Indiana, and I think Missouri. So 6 different states, many different cities. But in all that, each time I do it, I build a business so that I hire the experts so that I can make passive income. I literally, 30 plus properties, apartment complexes, hotels, and everything that I have. I literally work maybe 30 minutes a month on all those because I have experts doing it. I just look at the property management statements and look at everything, make sure everything's good, and then go back to play with my kids. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. And it's one of those things where, like you said, there's so much information out there on how to do things. People kind of get overwhelmed with how to do things, but there's a process and a methodology behind it. And that kind of leads me to the next question I want to ask you is, since you've been coaching and teaching people, and a lot of times you go to those seminars and they're very like gung ho, get to the back, and people are just so excited they want to buy property the next day, and they're just like jumped on adrenaline. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen people make when they try and get into whether it's real estate or just passive investing or investing in general?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. Now, the biggest mistake is running the back and spending that money. I would 100% say that. In fact, my conferences that I create, I have 2 conferences now. We're getting a 3rd one in 2026. But each one, it is a no sales pitch conference. Like, we're not going to be at the main stage saying, now run to the back. It's none of that. It's literally building a community. So that's the first one. I made that mistake. That's my very first mistake. Now, the second mistake when you are investing in real estate is you don't create the business, which I just talked about, but in creating the business, you do not find the right people. You don't hire the right people. This is what I did. This is why my property manager started stealing from me. So imagine that same scenario where you are starting a convenience store. You get everything, you get inventory and employees, and you see somebody walking across the street and you say, "Hey, you got a pulse? come in here and manage my business, manage my money, manage my inventory, manage my customer, manage everything. No, you wouldn't do that. You would hire and you would take your time interviewing lots and lots of candidates. Same thing with real estate investing. We build the business first, make sure we have a good city that has lots of inventory, the types of properties we want to buy. But then we also make sure that we find, before we buy any real estate, the right property manager. And that right property manager, interviewing 6, 7, 8, even 10 property managers, you're going to find one that really stands out. And I have a list of 20 plus questions that I give my students to ask property managers when they're interviewing them and the answers. But when you find the right property manager, they're going to help you do this business right. And the last thing I'll quickly say is a lot of people have come to me and said, Dustin, I bought this house and I did everything those gurus said. And I went to try to find a property manager. And I called and the property manager says, no, I will not manage that property because I'll get shot there. Well, it's no longer an asset. It's a liability now because you have to manage it yourself or you have to figure out what to do with it. Instead, how much better? Instead of calling a property manager and saying, hey, property manager, I bought this property. Will you manage it? And they say no and run away. Instead, you say, and this is building the business, getting the right people before you get the inventory. Hey, property manager, I'm looking to buy this property, number 1 Happy Street, whatever the address is. And how much will it rent for? What's my clientele? What's the vacancy factor? What kind of expenses? How much will a repair be? You ask all these questions. If they say no, you don't waste your time and don't waste your money and buy that property. You move on. But if they say yes, you have such great information because they are the ones, your property managers are the ones that are literally going to be working with that property day in and day out for many years. I have property managers sticking with me for 10 plus years. And so that's the biggest thing. You build the business and then you hire the property manager and then everything else comes into place.
Yeah. And one of the things that I know a lot of people that I see people do is they want to go cheap and they won't hire a property manager. And when I see people who are out of state investors not hiring a property manager, I'm like, oh,
that's just silly.
Yeah. But one of the interesting things that really hit, and I was taking some notes here, is that you mentioned is, if you ask a realtor the question, they can't tell you, oh, I would not buy that property or invest in that area because they can't. But a property manager give you more information on that property as well. So really interesting. Again, note of, like you mentioned, a lot of people always do it backwards, or it's buy the property and then figure it out from there. It's how about you figure it out before you buy the property? And, one of the things I'm a big proponent of is, especially people getting started early, is, if you're going to spend $150,000 on an asset, spend the $500 again on a plane and actually just go look at the property.
Love it.
And I'll share this story and we can start wrapping up a little bit, where we took a property back at foreclosure and I turned it into a rental and interviewed property managers and did, a whole thing. And the property manager was very responsive, very good, but then they started having some turnover. And then tenant was in there. We had the victim. New tenant goes in and having trouble renting. And I'm like, something's just not going wrong. I'm like, why isn't this place? But call up an agent and basically, hey, look, I'm considering selling this. Can you go by? Tell me what do you think it's worth? She walks in. She's like, what the hell happened? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, did they do some plumbing work? I'm like, yeah, but everything's fixed. Well, they didn't fix it. Literally, they had to replace a drain line that they had a 8-inch cut through the drywall, up the wall, in the ceiling, that they never patched or repaired. So you'd walk into the first thing you do, we open the door and it's like, oh, you see an exposed pipe running around. And then she says, what, the bathroom doesn't work? And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, yep, I should have probably taken a ride up there, which I did at one point in time, but even periodically, or having somebody, a third party set of eyes checking on this stuff.
Yes. Can I tell you how I get around all that without even 30 plus properties that I own? I've literally only seen one of them. Yep. And so here's the great thing about this. So here's what you do. And you hit it on the very, very end, is having a third set of eyes. But I like having 10 sets of eyes. And this is how I get around all of this. Number one, your property manager, they are your quarterback. They help you score, they protect your money, all that sort of stuff. But if your property manager is bad, you also have to figure out how to get around them or make sure that they're doing things right. So when I say 10 sets of eyes, this is what I teach all my students. We use also other contractors. We also get other people to get into the property to see the property. Let me give you a quick example. This actually happened to me. In Houston, one of my properties, we had to replace the glass door, the sliding glass door, replaced it, had a company come and replace it. Well, I knew I had a plumber going in there the next day. The plumber was going to fix some this, that, the other toilets or whatever. And I said, hey, plumber, there's a sliding glass door I just installed. And he has no issues whatsoever. Like, he's literally just helping me out or, doing the work. And I said, would you mind take 2 seconds, open the close the door and see if you notice anything? Does it look bad? Is it broken? Whatever it might be. And let me know. Mm-hmm. And he literally did that. He called me up and said, oh, everything looks great. It looks fantastic. I love this. I'm like, perfect. So there are so many ways to get around having all these issues. And we want to have passive income.
Yeah.
So what I love to do, because people say, and your point was, if you're going to be investing out of state, which I love doing, I invest all over the country. All my students, we invest all over the country. You need to have the property manager and you need to pay your property manager. Now, I get the question all the time, Dustin, how do you afford a property manager? And I say, I don't. And I'll tell you, the reason why I say this is I don't pay my property managers. I don't pay my taxes. I don't pay my insurance. I don't pay my mortgage. I don't pay for repairs. I don't pay for any of that stuff. Like, I don't have to get a job to pay for those. I account for all those expenses before I buy the property, or I don't buy it if I cannot afford those expenses. But here's also one last key. That passive income of $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year. If you make that passive income, I make sure that is a line item as an expense. So I make sure that I will always get $500 every single month because it's an expense that has to come out because my family needs to be fed. And so if you bring all this together, when you build a business, you're going to have a business that makes you money. That's what businesses are for. Like, you would not buy a candy bar for $1 if you could only sell it for 50 cents because you'd lose money every single month or every time you sell the candy bar. But what you would do if you bought a candy bar for 50 cents and you can sell it for $1, you'd do it as many times as you could. And the great thing about real estate, let's say you didn't even have 50 cents, but it took you 25 cents to borrow the 50 cents. Then you're out of pocket 75 cents. You still sell it for $1. You make 25 cents. That's a beautiful thing about real estate. And when you came on my podcast, talk about leverage. I use leverage all the time responsibly. My wife is very frugal, so she helps me to be responsible with the leverage.
Same
but
here.
When you're utilizing leverage, you can grow and scale very, very fast. And now I have extra money that I could park in notes or other people's deals and all that great stuff.
No, that's great. And great advice and tips on there as well. As we wrap up the show, how can people learn more about what you do, get involved, reach out? What's the best way for people to contact you?
Absolutely. Actually, I have a real estate investing course I'll literally just give away for free. Do you mind if I share that with everybody?
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. So if you text the word rental to 33777, RENTAL, rental to 33777, I'll literally give you my free real estate investing course, show you how to do everything I just talked about and more, how to scale your business, quit your job, invest anywhere in the country. You can even go to masterpassiveincome.com/free course, masterpassiveincome.com/free course. I'll literally give it to you. You can also find me on my podcast, and you also even be able to hear Chris on my podcast. If you go to Master Passive Income and you listen to the podcast anywhere, podcast or play, this is the Master Passive Income podcast. And on top of that, you can find me on Instagram, reach out to me on DM. I love chatting with people. The Dustin Heiner, THE Dustin Heiner. I'll be there to help you out as well.
Great. Well, Dustin, thanks for coming on today. Thanks for providing great input, great advice for those people listening on Spotify, your favorite listening station. Leave us a review. And I'm going to text you that to get that course as well, because you can never not learn in real estate. There's always something you're going to learn. So
Dustin, thanks a lot, Chris.
Thanks again. Take care. Thank you for joining Lauren and I on this episode of the Creating Wealth Simplified podcast. Each week, we bring you expert education, experience, and information in a digestible format to help you identify investment opportunities so you can build wealth through real estate and take action toward your financial goals. Enjoy the show, share with a friend, or subscribe to the show and leave us a review.